I want to thank everybody for being here. We've got our partner Tagmarshal. Some of you may have met Bodo before, and also we have Chandler Withington from Hazeltine with us here to talk about his experience. So I want to thank both of them for taking their time, and all of you for being a part of this, and want to make sure we get any of your questions answered as we go. I know that they've got a deck presentation that they want to go through, but certainly want to keep this interactive, and I guess speak up or send me a chat if you have a question as we go, and we'll try to get those answered. But again, thanks for everybody for being here. Chandler, I'll turn it over to you if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Good to be on with you and Bodo as well. And for anybody else who's going to be on today to eventually learn about the Tagmarshal system, our experience, I'm happy to share. I think what I'll do is I'll just share first about Hazeltine, who we are, and how the Tagmarshal system kind of fits into who we are on a daily basis. For anybody who's unfamiliar with Hazeltine National, we are located southwest of the Twin Cities, about 30 miles outside of the Twin Cities. We were founded in 1962, so I think in the golf world, in the terms of things, we're still kind of a baby on the block. We were founded by a former USGA president named Totten Heffelfinger. And Totten's vision as a former USGA president, he was president in 1951 through 53, was being a former USGA president was to bring championship golf back to the state of Minnesota. In the state of Minnesota, you had seen championships at Interlaken and Minnetonka in the early part of the 20th century, in 1916, 1924, 1930, but really nothing after that. And the vision was, could we get major championship golf to come back to Minnesota? So he came out and grabbed land, again, about 30 miles outside of Minneapolis, and registered Robert Trent Jones to build the golf course. And the mission was to host major championship golf and to have a membership that supported that mission. And we opened the golf course in 1962, and really because of Todd Heffelfinger's connections within the world of golf, we started getting into championships right away, first with the Women's Open in 1966, and then with the Men's Open in 1970. And ever since, championships have been at the forefront. We've hosted a Ryder Cup, 2 Men's U.S. Opens, 2 Women's U.S. Opens, a Senior U.S. Open, U.S. Amateur, a Mid-Amateur, and in 2024, we're going to host the U.S. Amateur again. And in 2029, we'll be the first club in the United States to have hosted the Ryder Cup twice. So it's been a mission that our founders had and a vision that they had, and it's one that we've been able to support for the last 58 years. And I think when you look at that picture of the Ryder Cup on the bridge, it's how Hazeltine is viewed by a lot of people in the United States and in the international world of golf. Hazeltine is comprised of about 325 golf members, is considered a family club, but also is considered a golf club. No other amenities besides golf, and golf is our focus. So with that, just being a golf club, that is what people come to Hazeltine for, and their expectations are high. And I know we'll talk about throughout this presentation about what the expectations are and how do we deliver upon them, and where does pace of play fit in the rank and file of importance. But that is who we are at Hazeltine National.
Thanks, Chandler. Now you forgot to talk about yourself. Clearly the club ranks higher there. You've got quite a nice journey as well that brought you to where you are now, right?
I have. Patrick and I were talking about before the call began about how lucky we've been. I think in the golf industry, a lot of it is luck, timing, and opportunity. I grew up in New Jersey, actually in the backyard of the USGA in a little town called Basking Ridge. I didn't start playing golf until I was 13 or 14. We were actually down in Hilton Head Island when I was 13, and we were staying in a house on Harbor Town. For those of you familiar with the PGA Tour, the MCI Heritage Classic, it was at the time, was going on. But golf in 1992 was not the game it is today. Tiger Woods was really still 4 or 5 years away from changing what I think the image was of golf as far as being athletic. My image of golf at the time was that it's, for a lot of older men who, don't dress well and can't run, jump, swim, catch, throw, any of that. It was for the non-athletes. But my friends and my cousins got me to go out and watch golf while we're down there at Harbor Town. And we stood behind a tee on one of the par fives watching the players hit drivers. And if anyone on this call remembers the first time they saw live golf, it makes such an impression, and watch the players at that level. And this was still back in '92 when metal woods were just starting to come into it, but some players were still hitting persimmon woods. And I watched a player hit persimmon wood out of sight, and he made it look easy. And I thought that was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen. And we ended up following him around for the rest of the tournament. And he was a younger player. Younger back then was 27. And he went on to win, and he immediately became my favorite player and the kind of person that I wanted to emulate with my career and be like. And my education as a kid was whenever he would play in a tournament, I would set the VCR. If anybody on this call can even remember what that was, I had a VCR, and I would just play it back and watch what he was doing, and I tried to imitate him. And that was in '92. 14 years later, when I was working at Seminole, I got to meet my hero. And I was nervous about that because I know a lot of people who have met their heroes, and it ended up being a disappointing experience. And I'm lucky to say that wasn't the case for me. I got to caddy for him in the pro member, and my hero growing up was Davis Love III. And he could not have been nicer to me or more supportive of my mission to become a PGA head professional, because his dad was one. And it was a starting point. And for those of you who follow golf well enough, you know what happened here in 2016. Davis was the captain. I was interviewing for the job here at Hazeltine in 2012. I was the lead assistant at Marion Golf Club at the time, and I was just trying to break through like so many assistants. I was just trying to get a head job, much less one like this. But I got the job, and I remember thinking, as excited as I was to reach the top of the mountain and start to lead an organization, specifically one like this, and we had a major championship around the corner with the Ryder Cup. I got the job just after the 2012 team lost at Chicago, and that was the team that was captained by Davis. And I remember being disappointed because, I kind of wish they had held him off for another 4 years. How cool would that have been if he would have been the captain here in 2016? And I knew the history. I'm kind of a history nerd when it comes to golf. No losing captain on the American side has ever captained twice in the close to 100 years of the tournament. But the USA team laid an egg in Scotland in 2014, and they blew up the whole model, and they gave Davis a second chance. And to work with him on building a winning campaign for the Ryder Cup was a dream. Is about the only way I can sum it up. The whole experience was an absolute dream, and really gave us a lot of momentum, here as a membership at Hazeltine. But that's a little bit about how I got into golf and how I got here.
Yes, that is such a neat, round story. I love it. Thank you. That must have really given you rocket fuel to go above and beyond working with the team at Hazeltine. Very nice. Thank you so much. My story is not nearly as exciting, even though I have traveled as well. You will hear an interesting German accent. That's where I'm from. I was born in Heidelberg, Southwest Germany. You mentioned, or one of you mentioned Atlanta earlier. That's where our headquarters is in the US. So we're all too aware of the COVID numbers spiking and everyone hunkering down. Right now I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, where other offices. So I'm officially wearing shorts because it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere. I have been in technology for many years, and Tagmarshal we started in 2015. Interestingly enough, not too far from where you are there, Chandler, with Hazeltine. Our first US customer was Erin Hills, and Whistling Straits following very closely on their foot. We have, at this point, we're helping clubs manage the traffic on course and really bring technology into a space that has had a sort of very manual way of management. Some have called us the Waze or Google Maps of golf course management, and that's probably quite apt. So we're very fortunate in that 30 of the top 100 clubs now work with us. You can see at the top here, there's a nice list of private clubs that you're probably familiar with. I believe Baltusrol is now even in the running to get a unexpected PGA show, a PGA Championship shuffle their way. They've just had a major renovation, which would be nice for Ryan and the team. Oakmont, Hazeltine mentioned here, Valhalla, Eastlake, down in Atlanta as well. I'm sure you know them well. There's quite a few more, and also we obviously work quite well with the daily fee space where it gets a bit busier, and the resorts. I believe, Chandler, you actually got the heads up for what we do from the team over at Pebble Beach, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah, friendly with the director of golf over Pebble Beach. Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, we're a tech partner to the European Tour, and also we help and work with the USGA. You mentioned them earlier because we've got a lot of broad-based data that they're very interested in, and yeah, just helping where we can. And it's been a tremendous journey for us. If you asked me 7 years ago if we'd be working with all these amazing clubs, I would have pinched myself. But the majority of our clubs that we work with are that middle of the road, $50, $70 green fee, or that middle of the road good private club that wants to just get ahead of the competition. And they're getting great results. And it's really, yeah, the system works really well if you've got a handful of staffers or if you've got a huge staffing contingent like a Pebble Beach might. So it does the job either way. But today is really about Hazeltine and Chandler, your experience. What I'd like to start with is just a quick look at what are the factors that are key to the player experience. And obviously there's a lot of research going into this, and there's a lot of daily endeavor and challenges that you and all the operators out there are solving. So from this list, Chandler, what would you say are sort of the top three that matter and have mattered to you as a professional over the years, and also that matter most to golfers?
Yeah, Bodo, I think you've got a great list there. I think that's relevant to most facilities. The course design and course conditioning. I'd say the course conditioning for experience. When a player's day is done, what do they look back on? And we all know, look, if you just aerified the greens, it's not going to be as great of an experience as it is when the greens are rolling. I think the condition of the greens, first and foremost, is the player experience. I know it's how I feel as I travel around. I always want to see the condition of the greens. That is where the imagination of the golf course, I think, comes out to me. Your clubhouse and amenities, important. The experience they have with the playing partners in their group, important. For us at Hazeltine, we start with the course conditioning, and then we look at the interaction points with staff and other members. What is that experience like? We're in the customer service industry. So if the course conditions are good, they've had a positive interaction with every touch point from the time they arrive at the bag drop, to the golf shop, to the locker room, to the dining room, to our caddies, to on-course staff, at your beverage huts, service stations, et cetera, to the times that they leave. If all those personal touch points are positive, great. I think when you take this entire list, it can all be completely torpedoed if the round of golf took 4 hours and 45 minutes or 5 hours or even over 4.5 hours. Waiting to play, I don't think is on anybody's top 10. Nobody ever came in and said, boy, I really enjoyed how long that took. And people don't talk about it when things go right, but as soon as things go wrong and they had to wait behind a group, it really sours, and they'll tell 10 or 12 people on their way out, including us. So that is so much a part of the experience that I think course conditioning being first, if the course wasn't in great shape, that'll upset an experience. A staff member has the potential to do that very quickly, but pace of play for sure is right there in our top three.
Thanks, Chandler. I think just to back you here, and obviously there's no surprises in how this ranks really, and many of you listening in would have probably mentioned that as well. So the USGA did some major research around this because obviously they want to know, and they want you all to know what ranks top, what should we invest in if you want the industry to be driven forward. So course conditioning indeed comes out top. I think they surveyed about 25,000 players, 82% saying that's key to their enjoyment, and obviously we all know that. And in fact, at most clubs, the budget that goes into course conditioning is as much as possible rather than as little as necessary, right? Because we know it's flagship. But interestingly enough, who we play with, accessibility, who's our playing partner is important. We all want to play with nice people, ideally our friends, but pace of play comes in very close. You can see that's only 6% difference. It's very important to golfers, and obviously that can be translated into flow. You mentioned, well, if my round takes 15 minutes longer, but I didn't have to wait, there's just a good flow behind it, I probably won't mind. And sometimes my round comes through on pace, but I've had to wait all the time because it was stop-start, and that interrupts my flow. So flow is actually more important. And then ultimately for those of us who hope to play more golf, time is a huge factor, right? I mean, having kids, having busy lives, time is a big thing. So if we can get some control into that space, that means people can play more. So that's important. No surprises here, Chandler, I would wager.
No surprise at all. And you're talking about it. It's many of us who follow the progress of our game and how much it grows. The two biggest factors that are a detriment to people playing the game consistently are cost and time. So we figure out those two obstacles, we make this a really time efficient game, and it's affordable. We'll come out on top in the years ahead.
No, for sure. There's one more set of research that was presented at the 2019 Golf Innovation Symposium, which was hosted in Tokyo. Those were the good old days where we could still get on flights without masks and travel and see the world. So they had a whole year or a year and a half's research deployed into this. The lady on the stage is Christina Schoonover. She is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Stott, and she's also the operations director at Erin Hills. So we've gotten to know her quite well. And Christina and her colleague did this research, and they looked at what are the touch points that really matter over and above those big tickets, right? And they really wanted to rank everything that a golfer does as part of their experience. And that includes picking up the golf bag and sticking it into the boot. That includes driving to the gate. That includes cleaning your balls and out on the getting some shots in out at the range. Anything that a player might possibly do was ranked, and they found that there's 1,000 touch points, which sounds a bit crazy, but if you think about it, what all goes into a round, and getting to the course and going back and getting ready and having your kit together, there's a lot of touch points in this. And they wanted to rank them. What are the biggest frustrators and what are the biggest delighters, and what sort of floats in the middle? And what they found was really surprising in that the number one top positive delighting factor for a golfer is a positive ranger experience. A positive ranger etiquette scores top out of everything that you can do to a golfer. And I don't think that's because players love rangers so much if they're nice. It's because they're used to a ranger being a grumpy person coming over to them and saying, hey, you're slow, get on with it, right? And just having this policing force out on the course, and they don't like it. So I used to play with a friend who used to, by default, find the ranger and tip him $20. Say, please leave us and don't shout at us. And on the other end of the scale is the worst performing factors in terms of that. Those really frustrate players is other people's speed. So if I have to wait, and corrective pace of play actions. So if somebody comes over and says, hey guys, get on with it, you're slow. So obviously that's a conundrum, right? Because players want us to solve it, but they're also telling us, don't come over and correct me. So how did you used to do things at Hazeltine, and then how would you, now that that you're ahead of the game, how have you come to understand the space and how you're managing things, knowing those sorts of things are important to players and also so polar in terms of their experience? You mentioned it earlier as well.
Yeah, Bodo, I think the survey results you just shared are spot on, and we've heard this directly from our members as well, is the experience with whoever is going to monitor pace of play. We typically refer to those people as rangers, can be either positive or negative. In the past, the way we had done things was, I would say, mildly efficient. The ranger would make a loop throughout the golf course. It would probably take that person about 1 hour to make the loop. They had a schedule in front of them. It was basically like a spreadsheet, which explained if the group teed off at 10 o'clock, that means they should be on the 13th tee by about 1 o'clock. And if it was 1 o'clock and they were in the 12th fairway or the 12th tee, that meant that they were behind, and we need to issue a warning to that group. I think at the time that was very argumentative data. You know, people would say, well, we can see the group in front of us. They're on the 13th green. We're really not that far behind, and we're on pace. And it was very argumentative because it was almost kind of, you know, a little bit objective as far as whether a group was slow or not. It was open for interpretation, and it was argumentative. So we didn't like that system. We felt like we were spending also a lot of manpower hours paying the ranger to make loops when either maybe the golf course wasn't that busy or pace of play was running just fine. We were still spending labor on days that it was just fine. To back that up, we also felt like some of the feedback we were getting on our rangers as far as their body language or their tone, to what Bodo just alluded to, was also not very positive. So we need to think about the people that are implementing and informing. So in making kind of an overhaul on this and knowing the priority, like we said, it's in our top 3. How do we really want to address this? You know, the first trick was getting Tagmarshal involved, but I would say the second part, as far as when we recognize that we do have an issue, is how do we address it? And the training that we went through, and we really kind of narrowed down the amount of people that would go out and address it. We wanted it first and foremost to be the golf professional staff, myself included, myself and the assistant professionals. If we were available and able to get on the golf course, we wanted to start with those people. It was a group of about 5 of us. One of us should have been on duty at all times and able to go out. So we trained that small group, and we started with, first and foremost, when we go out and you stop and inform a group, the first thing you have to do is you have to smile. When you're approaching a group and you're going to inform them of something that's negative, start with a smile. And when you think about the experiences you've had with people, not just in golf, but in customer service anywhere, whenever there's an issue, a smile says, I'm here to be a part of the solution, you know, not to shame. I think pace of play is such a shaming mechanism, and it can go wrong quickly. So a smile starts to disarm immediately. So a smile, quick conversation. How's your day going? Everyone having a good time? Wonderful. Need to make you aware. So now the second part is awareness. Need to make you aware you are a little bit out of position. Give them the data. If you need to tell them, you know, as of right now, you should have been on the 13th green. So we're a little bit behind. So, you know, I'm sure maybe you were looking for a golf ball somewhere, or maybe you had a tough hole, but we need to ask you to do your best to get back on pace. Again, our pace of play is 4 hours and 10 minutes, and step out of the way. The part that I didn't mention there, that's part of our protocol, is we only approach players between the play of holes, and we won't ride up to them when they're about to hit a tee shot, an approach shot, or a putt. We will get them between holes to where they get a chance to understand the situation, process it, but then start the play of a new hole and take responsibility for where they are and go forward. But that is how we've changed, I think, just the interaction level to, we used to stop people during the play of a hole. Our body language wasn't great. And then we weren't asking for cooperation. I think whenever you ask for cooperation versus, to what Bodo alluded to earlier, the sharp tone of, you're behind, get back on pace. You know, we have to remember that their experience still matters as much as everyone else on the golf course, and they still have golf to play. And a smile and the body language can go a long way towards them saying, great, no problem. Well, and that, my experience has been, if that is the approach, we're asking for cooperation, most people say, great, no problem. Yep, we get it. We had a tough hole on the 10th or whatever it is. We'll get going. And I'd say 90% of the time we had a lot of success with that. And Bodo, I don't know if you want me to touch on just now the Tagmarshal part of things, as far as how we implemented that, or what the process is.
I'd just like to recap one thing, because you so effortlessly talked it, but there's actually a lot of magic in what you said, in that in your approaches that you and your team have when going up to players who are out of position, you not once would tell them you're slow, right? You're telling them you're out of position, which is not a judgment. It's a simple fact. You're a bit out of position. Well, easy, let's get back in position. Where do you want us? 200 yards ahead? No problem. We can catch up. And you never once said you're slow, because players, when they're told they're slow, it's like, are you calling me a slow player? It's like, are you calling me stupid? Or it's very personal, right? So, and that's when it becomes opinionated and they push back. But I think, yeah, let's look at the data side of things, and because I mean, the two things we're learning is we need to control the space and really understand it, so we're not guessing our way around it, and that really changes the game in terms of how we can approach people and how we can manage the space. So if you don't mind me just talking to this quickly. So as far as Tagmarshal is concerned, we cater to walking golf clubs like Hazeltine is, and I mentioned Whistling Straits and so on, but also cart-based clubs. that would run mostly carts or only carts. So we can do both as well. If you've got walkers, and I know in 2020 with COVID, we saw many clubs boosting their walking golf, and many people rediscovering that, which was nice to see. So what these groups get is a tag, which is what Chandler's using at Hazeltine. Others are using a mobile device like this, such as Eastlake, for instance, that does a bit of two-way communication. And the carts get either these passive trackers installed, so we know where they are at all times, which is obviously helpful when it comes to fleet management, or they get a screen installed, which is more your traditional GPS type thing. And these send information to our system, where our system then makes sense of the traffic and anything that moves out there, and gives you that line of sight, which I'm sure, Chandler, you're going to talk to just now. But this is really what feeds what people would call the Waze or the Google Maps of golf on-course management. And this information now gets presented in the pro shop, on a tablet, on somebody's smartphone, whoever needs access to this. And you mentioned it's 5 people in your team. Elsewhere, it might be 15 or 20 or only 2 who've got access to this information and make sense of it. Chandler, I'm going to skip one ahead, and then I'll let you talk to what things look like, what you guys look at, and how it helps you and makes your day easier and makes your management accurate.
Wonderful. You want me to take it from here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So what he just mentioned, we're primarily a walking club. So we use the very simple GPS unit that we can either give to a caddy, attach to a golf bag, or even we use push carts at Hazeltine. And then they go out and they do the work for us. So the position that I alluded to in prior years of a ranger that would drive around the golf course trying to identify problems, we eliminated that position. So there was a cost aspect to that equaled savings for us. But more importantly was the efficiency. So this tablet that you're looking at there with a course map, it's the same way that if I were getting ready to drive into downtown Minneapolis, I would look at a traffic map. Where are the issues? What do I want to try and avoid? Except this just gives us a snapshot of what all is going on. And it's been a wonderful tool. For years prior, I always wondered, like, what's going on out there? Where's this group? Are they holding anyone up? And we can always look at my phone, which is on me 24/7. We have this up in the golf shop. Our first tee starter has this tablet, and we also have this at the bag drop. So, but you'll also see administration departments, our general manager, our beverage hut, our turn window. They're always looking at this as well, so they know who exactly is going to walk up to them next. It helps them for the name recognition. But we look at this, and the piece of technology that we use the most is our entire professional staff gets a text notification. We set it at when a group starts to fall 10 minutes behind. We get a notification, group 17 is now 10 minutes behind pace. First thing we'll look at is, where are they? Do they have 1 or 2 holes left? Is it they're almost done? Are they maybe on hole 13 or somewhere earlier in the round where we can have a chance to correct this? And are they holding anyone up? And we may get a notification they're behind pace, but there isn't a group within 3 holes of them, so we don't even address that situation. If they are behind pace, and say it's hole 14 or behind, we will go out and address the situation, and we know exactly where to go. So it's very time efficient as far as we know what the issue is. We can go directly to it. Again, address the group between the play of holes, be kind, ask for cooperation. But then we make a note. You see there on the right side of that screen, there is the button there for add a note. So whoever addresses the situation, if it's myself, one of the assistants, they'll go in there, they'll click on it, they'll add a comment, they'll say, we talked to them, they're aware. I don't think we've ever had any confrontation, but you have a chance to make comments in there. So that note gets added. So that the next piece of technology that I use as the director of golf is the following morning, I'll come in, I always pull up the prior day's tee sheet, and I'm looking for notes. I'm looking for, do we have any problems? Did anybody finish a round of golf maybe in 4 hours, 20 minutes, 4 hours and 25 minutes, or 4.5 hours? And the notes, have a red notification, so it jumps right off the page. I'll click on it. It may say the 10 o'clock group there with Joe Schmidt, Charles Jones, Rob Andrew, Bill Casper. We addressed them on the 12th hole, and they finished in 4 hours and 35 minutes. So we've had some of those this last season, and in that situation, I would put a phone call out to the players in the group and say, hey, tough day yesterday on the golf course. Hope you understand our expectation again is 4 hours and 10 minutes. Again, very, very friendly conversation. And the vast majority of people we've had those conversations with, They take ownership of it, and we haven't had a second issue with them. I'll then take that phone call, I'll enter it into a log so that if we ever have a second interaction with them later in the year, say I've already had a phone conversation with them and they continue to have slow rounds, then our golf committee puts them under review and they have to meet in front of the golf committee. Now, we haven't had a single person get a second phone call this year since using Tagmarshal. So I think people understand there's a very visible accountability measure now. They understand that I'm pretty prompt on making phone calls the following morning and that everything is being logged. So that's really what you want, I think, in any situation. It works really well for us when we have repeat customers. I understand it's a little bit more of a challenge at a public situation where you might have a customer once or twice or 3 times. But again, our responsibility is to deliver on the expectations that our customers have on a daily basis and do it with tact. And this, Tagmarshal has allowed us to do that. But it really does the work for us. It gives us data, something that we can point at. The other thing that we used to deal with in the past was members feeling like they had to take the situation into their own hands, where if there was a slow play situation, we would commonly get a call. They go, oh my gosh, this group on number 4, they've got 2 holes in front of them. We're waiting all the time. Get out here and do something. We get that phone call all the time in the past. As we started the first two months, this was our first season with Tagmarshal. As we started the first 2 months, we would still get those phone calls, and I would write out to those groups. I'd pull up the tablet. I'd show them and be like, yeah, they do have 2 holes in front of them, but they are on pace. Look right here at the data. They're on pace for a round of 4 hours and 8 minutes. We cannot tell people they're playing slow when they're playing to the expectation that we've set. While you may not love that they have green grass open in front of them, it's not a situation that we're going to approach. I think once you have something that is not, again, like what my opinion is, but it's just hard data and you can point at it, it's been an educational process, I think, for the first 2 months for membership, but they understand that we get the notifications immediately if there is an issue. We go out immediately if there's an issue and we address it. And I think when people realize that there's a system in place to address any of these issues, they now can put their phones away and go about enjoying things and understanding that we're going to do our job.
Chandler, so I think you're explaining really nicely how you now have control over the space and how it's making the members more accountable and your guests as well. But I think one of the things that to maybe quickly talk to is how do you know who's in a group? Because you've got a very nice integration running with your tee sheet, right? With 4 tees, I believe. So you would know how many guests are in a group, who is it? Is it the usual suspects, that sort of thing? How does that work on a day-to-day basis?
Correct. And that was another selling point, I think, for us to get this system in place. Was probably like most clubs, we've been using 4 tees for a number of years. And the ability just to move the tee sheet over into Tagmarshal, assign the Tagmarshals in relation to the tee sheet, and then most importantly, to have the reports come back with data that is associated with the name, so we know exactly who may be causing an issue or who do we need to approach after a round, or is there anybody who's becoming what we would call like a repeat offender. The Tagmarshal integration is a big part of that. So that was a big selling point. I think if we didn't have an integration and we're just putting tags out there, not knowing who they were assigned to, or we had to do a lot of that work ourselves on a daily basis, we probably wouldn't have made the move.
Yeah, just maybe worth mentioning that we're now integrated with about 15 tee sheets. So certainly the ones that matter, your Jonas Club Essentials, 4 tees and so on, and Chronogolf and so on, are really nicely integrated. And it is an efficiencies tool, right? So we never want to add additional steps to you. We want to make you guys more efficient. And I think you're a prime example of how that's possible. Let me just jump ahead. Quickly noting here the text notification that Chandler mentioned. This one is an example from Oakmont, and they've got text notifications around geofence breaches, but you can also set them up for groups falling out of position. So the good thing about this is that we know that you and your teams are busy, but we also need to give you a chance to know when you need to look at the system, right? So then it pings you, and then you would get, you can click on the link and it tells you what's going on, and then you can make a decision if you want to give it a few minutes or get out there immediately. So it's not a case of you need to go man that control room all the time, but rather the information comes to you where you want it. Okay, but now that we talked about, yeah, you're putting this effort in, you've put these processes in place. How do you feel it's impacted the experience at Hazeltine? One of the things that keeps coming up is that obviously expectations are really high. I'm playing at this amazing club. Firstly, I'm a member here, so I'm special, but also I'm bringing guests along and their expectations are really high, and I want to proudly showcase what is a part of me, right, as a member. But so how you feel that that this helps to create that premium experience that you want to stand for and that you, I suppose, advertise as well?
Well, Bodo, we want to control the controllables, on a daily basis. So it's our preparation as far as how we prepare the golf course to match the expectations, as far as how we prepare the golf staff and the staff throughout the clubhouse to match the expectations, to our caddies, to our amenities. What are all those touch points? And if we are doing our best to control the controllables as far as the touch points, but as I alluded to earlier, if pace of play gets away from us, it could completely grenade the entire thing. So we're trying to look at all those touch points, control them as best we can, prepare and train staff to do their part, and know that if the round takes 4 hours and 10 minutes, the people will be walking off the golf course pretty happy. So anything in life, any product that we put out there is about setting expectations and then delivering upon them. But Tagmarshal's been a big part of that experience as far as delivering on what we think is a very key part of the experience.
I just remembered Conway Farms down in Chicago. They said that for them, investing in this is like an insurance that ensures that every single round can be excellent, because they don't want to even have one round go haywire, because it's not just that one round, right? It's all the groups behind, and then there's a lot of fallout potential. So it really is something that's worth paying attention to. One of the things I wanted to also quickly dig into is how has it helped your efficiencies? I think you mentioned quite a few points, but maybe we can look at some data here that's actually from your July, which this year obviously meant this would have been probably month 2 of effective operations, right? Because you would have had a very slow April. I don't know if you got any play out, and then it must have been very busy.
The funny part though is usually we would have been slow in April and May, but this year we went straight to 150 rounds a year because of COVID. Golf was one of the few things that people could do. So we started full steam ahead in April, May, and June and July. There were record rounds of golf not only in Minneapolis but throughout the country. So very busy year with a very busy tee sheet and tons of potential for things to happen as far as slow play.
I think from an efficiencies point of view, it's maybe nice to point out that you were able to handle this increased demand with fewer staff members, right? Where you used to have a ranger or maybe more than one because one person can't work 7 days a week. You now managed to do it from the pro shop. And I think worth pointing out that this is a month of July. How accurate you are already this early on in the game. So you want to play to 410 and you came in at 4:09:17 seconds. So just under what's important to point out, because the average hides all sorts of bad things, right? Because you may have early morning rounds that are really quick, or you may have some twosomes that are really quick, and they in the average hide the rounds that are 20, 30, 40 minutes over with wait times. But even here, you've got almost 60% on pace or faster, and then another almost 30 within 10 minutes, which is probably just fine if there's no waits. So you're already this early on, and our team is also acknowledging that you've managed to control the space so well that virtually 90% of your rounds are on pace or within 10, and that's smooth sailing as far as the experience is concerned. So this talks to an individual, a whole month, but each individual day has got data and stats like this. So you can look at each individual tee time as it played. And these are those notes that you mentioned. So that is the sort of thing that you'd look at what tee times did my team intervene, were they successful? And then also you would look at potentially how did our holes perform? And if there's some of the holes that are going really off, that might inform how you set up the course and there might be a few tweaks that you would have done. Is that something that that you've looked at with your superintendent team at this point?
Well, we have more of an awareness. We see our third hole takes a lot of time, and then we tend to see a bottleneck on the fourth tee, which is a par 3. So our par 3s tend to follow up par 5s, and we tend to see a little bit of waiting on the par 3 tees. So it's an awareness factor, and we're trying to figure out how much can we really do about it. There's you talked to the key word earlier you mentioned is flow, and how do we get the entire round of flow? If there were 4 hours and 10 minutes, they didn't have to wait a single minute. There is the beverage hut, for example. We've learned how much time people spend at the beverage hut getting drinks and food, and how can we become more efficient as far as keeping people moving through those areas quicker. So we have an awareness now. Now it's a matter of, is it something we really need to approach and make drastic changes to or not?
Yeah, I see your halfway house has got a time allotment down here, and seems to be nicely efficient. I got a nice comment from Pinehurst, where they said their halfway house was always a bit of a lottery. Sometimes it would take 5 minutes, sometimes 25. And they never knew, right? So then they realized the one thing is that, well, firstly, if our halfway house team knows when are people approaching, they can be prepared, and they're not just at the back doing stock take. And also they realized a little thing like a hot dog making machine would bring efficiencies to them and shave off a couple of minutes, where it wasn't a case of, oh, you want a hot dog? Oh, I didn't realize you were a bit ahead of pace. I have to heat one up. It takes 12 minutes. Well, the machine made that space more controllable. Just that's the sort of thing that they said they never would have known if it wasn't for the tracking and measuring of things. Chandler, you mentioned your drinks setup. Do you have a mobile drinks unit out there, or is it a halfway?
It's a little different than a halfway. It is behind holes 4 and 13, so they see it twice throughout a round. It's very conveniently placed. And then we have one for after the turn, which is a little bit more of a trek to the clubhouse to get. So again, it's an awareness. We get a data point now on how long it's taking, and then we go from there.
Yeah, here's another map. This is a flipped over Erin Hills that we use for demo purposes. So what we're showing is that you would know where your marshal cart is, or your player assistant, or whoever's out there keeping an eye. You can even track your superintendent feet, and often superintendents would make use of gaps in the field where they can see there's a gap that's actually viable for the team to go and get some work done without getting in the player's way. And obviously the superintendent can see and pull his team back as needed. And if you have a mobile drinks cart, you can also see where they're at. And then if you have any interactions, that might speed up the service a little bit. So it's all those little touch points. And once you've got this information and this control, it lends itself to efficiencies. And maybe just to quickly summarize again how Tagmarshal makes sense of this traffic, because this course spaghettis in on each other very nicely. It's not a sort of long one hole after the other along the coast or something. Like, it's quite complicated, and there's a lot of ebb and flow between the groups when it comes to distance. So what we do is we measure the gap time between the groups, because while the distance opens up and spreads out again quite naturally, the gap time is what we want to track. So we're showing the gap time down here, and actually when COVID started, a lot of the clubs are saying, well, this actually helps us making sure that we're compliant as far as social distance concerned. And they said, but we want to keep it when this whole thing is over, because it's so useful. So you can see immediately where the groups are starting to bunch in on each other, because it's not always that obvious depending on how the course moves. But what Tagmarshal does is we show the biggest problem as the biggest icon. So my 7-year-old son would look at this map and say, hey, group number 17, there's something wrong here. And then the color indicates that these guys are holding up others. They're magenta or purple. And then these groups behind are slightly out of position, but it's not their fault. They're actually held up. So as a play assistant, you would now know this is the head of the snake. This is where I need to chat first. And all the other groups, the small green ones, you can safely ignore for now because they're all going very nicely. Here's one group that is out of position, but they're not holding up anyone. So it's not as much of an emergency. And you would know this whether you're at home or whether you're at a conference somewhere or wherever you are, because you've got access to it and it's presented to you in real time at all times. So this is the life management side of things, and here's sort of part of the data side. Obviously, there's geofencing. We even have a heat mapping system, which has come in handy for a lot of clubs that had to do a lot of single riding, because they said, well, great to be busy, but now we've got twice the amount of traffic. We need to actually be proactive around compaction and areas that are getting a lot of traffic. So the heat map, it literally shows where those risk areas, and then they try and guide play around that. So once you have this data, there's a lot you can do with it, and obviously we try and make it easy to use and easy to adopt by the teams. I think that's really it from my side. Chandler, thank you so much for your insight. Thanks to the audience as well. Thanks everyone. Take care.